Hello everyone, welcome back to the Green Room. My name is Victor, and today we're gonna be talking about three terms from the industry. Those being plot twist, foreshadowing, and retcon. I'm gonna be explaining what they are, and I'm gonna be giving few examples of where they've been used in the past. So there will be spoilers of the productions that I mentioned here, right? I decided to do this video because many people know what a plot twist means, but I've seen people use like in very different ways when they are actually not a plot twist. And to clarify what those are and where you can spot them, well, the first one that I'm going to be talking about is plot twist. That's the most known one out there, so that's why we're going to start with that one. And what is a plot twist? A plot twist, it's when the story we're telling or watching, it takes a very, very different turn from what we were going for, or a shocking revelation kind of thing. And that is used quite a lot. Movies usually do that a little bit better than TV, since in a movie you just have like an hour and a half or 2 hours to tell a story. So everything's very planned, right? For example, if you watch The Sixth Sense, which is an old movie with Bruce Willis, where you find out that he's actually dead the whole time, and if you watch the movie knowing that again, you will see that he's never interacting with anyone, only the kid. Everything is there. Almost every Shyamalan movie you watch, there are crazy and different plot twists. And since they are very pinpoint where they should happen and everything's very thought out, it always comes with a really good surprise, right? But a more, let's say, known one as well is Darth Vader being Luke's father, right? When he goes out, he tells Luke, "I am your father." It's a shocking revelation, like the biggest and the baddest guy ever is actually the main hero's father. And you gotta think that back in that time, in the 70s, in the 80s, movies were starting to go off the formula where they have like very simple stories, very mundane kind of stories, to this. Now we have like a space opera with Darth Vader being all that thing, and now he's the father of their main hero. That was really different, shocking for people back in that time. Or when we have in Game of Thrones, Cersei on season 5, even though that's not a very good season, Cersei helping the Faith militant to arrest her enemies, but then she gets arrested as well. That's a good plot twist too, because we have the character in power and she's doing all her things and she's nailing everything, and then she gets caught by her own mistakes and the Faith takes her away and now she's arrested as well. That takes stories in like different places where we were not thinking of going, which is really good because that can spice up movies and shows everything, so it doesn't get boring and surprises you. And a good plot twist is when if you watch the movie again, you can see their hints throughout the movie, so you can catch that. It's not something that they just come up in the moment and throw it there. An awesome one that's a very recent one is Parasite, right? We have the beginning of the movie is very comic, with the family being a parasite to the rich family, the Parkers, right? If I'm not mistaken, that's her last name. Where they are always taking someone out, doing a crazy plan, and then they find out that actually someone living in the basement, and the parasite is the parasite of the parasite, right? Oh, the crazy thing and everything there. But since it was planned out, they mentioned several times houses that have like layers underneath the earth, the ground, that people used to live in there. So you can spot those things. So when it happens, you were like, whoa, that's crazy. But at the same time, it's always been there. So when you see that happening, makes sense in a way. Sometimes they don't do it like right away, but they are there and they have to make sense, because a plot twist just thrown out there just to shock you is usually the one you see that I'm like, that, what? That doesn't make sense. That's bullshit, right? And you don't have to be a filmmaker or anything, just watching something doesn't make sense because they just gave you a very crazy revelation that takes you off. So doing plot twists is a great thing to spice up your story, but you gotta be careful so you don't ruin it and you don't lose people's interest on that. And the reason that I mentioned that TV usually doesn't do that well like plot twists is because we have like channels such as ABC, Freeform, or CW where they have the 22, 23 episodes per season, and the seasons are not completely done in a way of, oh, let's write every single script, everything, or let's write the whole show. They usually write a few episodes, then they're shooting, and things go as is. So sometimes they want to change something. They think of something they think it's cool. So new plot twist comes in, right? And sometimes they don't make much sense, or you're like, okay, ish. That's why movies usually do better because they gotta have everything done before shooting. Where TV, sometimes they just start shooting as they are writing, so that can get a little bit messy. And the second one we're gonna be talking about is retcon. Not many people know what retcon is, but they probably seen they've been used before, definitely. Um, Retcon has been used for so very long, especially in comic books industry, because what retcon is, you change something that happened in the past so you can make it fit in the story, in the narrative you're talking right now, you're telling right now. In comic books, use that because, oh, Spider-Man died like in comic issue, whatever, but we need to bring him back now. So they just make up like a very cheap excuse so he can be resurrected or something like it. And comic books do it all the time, right? And some movies or TV shows they started doing that. TV usually use that to add some new characters. New season comes out of a show, they want to add a few new characters, and so what they do is they create a character and they don't have the time or they don't want to waste time building up relationships with characters. So what they do is, let's say I'm the main character in a show and I never mention my best friend, let's call him Dave. New season comes out of nowhere, Dave shows up and we are best buds. And we say, oh yeah, I remember when we went to high school together. Yeah, that was crazy, man. So they just make like very subtle references to what happened in the past. Even though I never said that I met a Dave before until the character was made. That's a retcon because they're telling me that I have this best friend from so very long ago. We are crazy about each other, right? Or when you use that to change how two people met. You can say that me and Dave met in high school in the first season of the show, but season 3 comes along, we need to change it for whatever reason, and we say we met on the supermarket, and then we start talking, and we become friends. In retcons, they can be very subtle or not, and one example of being subtle is in Iron Man 2, we have when they are on the Stark Expo, I think that's what it's called, and the Iron Man suits start like flying around and attacking everyone. There's a little kid with an Iron Man helmet, and he does the hand thing to one of the robots, but then Tony Stark comes in and saves the kid. That was just like a kid that was a fan of Iron Man, right? We can all understand the kid. But then, years later, when they started doing the Spider-Man movies, the Marvel came out and said, oh yes, that little kid from Iron Man 2, that was actually Peter Parker. Because he's always been a fan of Tony Stark. And since we know that Tom Holland's Spider-Man has a very, very deep connection, like a fatherly bond with Iron Man, that is just, that helps us believe that he has always been fascinated by Tony Stark. That's very subtle. It doesn't change the story from Iron Man. It doesn't reflect anything. It's just like a very nod to us and a way to say, oh yeah, he's always been a fan of Stark. But a not very subtle one, it's on Game of Thrones, where in season one we have Cersei and Roberts talking about their baby that was born with dark hair. That baby never existed on the books, but the show made it exist, and the baby was born, and apparently the baby was born dead, unfortunately. But then season comes along, they never mention the baby again until we have season 5, and the opening shot of season 5 is a flashback from Cersei talking to a witch, and that witch tells Cersei that she's gonna have 3 kids. When we know those 3 kids are Joffrey, Marcella, and Tommen. Cool. What about the baby she had in the past? They make the as that baby never happened. So okay, the show used a retcon there to erase the baby from season 1. Fine. But then on season 7 comes along the retcon because she gets pregnant again. And you can say, oh, that's because the baby was never born. She was only pregnant, but still, is a retcon. They told us that she was never going to have more than 3 kids, but then she gets pregnant again. There's a retcon of a retcon. That's not subtle at all. And another retcon example from Game of Thrones again. I'm gonna reference a lot of Game of Thrones because they use a lot of those things, and they're very easy to explain here. One of them is in season 3. We have Arya and Melisandre talking, and Melisandre tells Arya, "You should many eyes: brown eyes, blue eyes, and green eyes." Cool. Season 3. Then on season 8, after we have Arya killing the Night King, before that, Melisandre tells Arya again, "I told you would shut many eyes: green eyes, brown eyes, blue eyes." And that is so Arya can, so the audience remembers that prophecy they talked a long time ago, so Arya can go and kill the Night King and doesn't seem out of nowhere, even though it was. They didn't have to change anything relatively big on the show in the sense of, I mean, they had to change because Jon was supposed to kill him, but anyway, right? But they didn't have to change much. It was simply giving a new meaning to a phrase they gave us a very long time ago. And the third and last term that we're going to be talking today, it's foreshadowing. What is foreshadowing? It's when the character or show or whatever is, they start telling us things that will happen in the future. All right. That's usually used so to remind us, the audience, of a certain aspect of that world, of the characters, because they're going to use that again and they haven't used in a long time, so they need us to remind us of something, or they just want to show how big and important that thing will be. Because one thing they can do is foreshadowing as something that would never happen, so when it happens, you know how big that thing is, how the gravity of that, right? Another example again is Game of Thrones season 7. We have since the start of the show, the season, sorry. They have like several mentions throughout every single episode of how the wall stood for millions of years, how the walls protect the ground, how the walls are this, how the walls is that, how the walls is badass. Okay, so they are trying to remind the audience how important that thing is, how powerful that thing is. So then on the last scene of the season, where the Night King destroyed the wall, you know how big that is, the gravity of that. Even though the show didn't use any of the gravity of the last season, it's still it's to shock us and be like, whoa, that thing they said like 5 billion times in the season that would never happen. And then we have it again on the last season, episode 5, on the King's Landing attack. We have all the characters say like a million times, when the bells ring, stop the attack. Why? I knew from like halfway through the episode that the attack would never stop, because they mentioned that so many times. Bells needs to ring, Daenerys needs to stop. Okay, that would never happen. It's so the show plays that on, oh, she doesn't respect the rules anymore. She's so crazy now. It's to give us that feeling of, oh, Everyone told her stop when the bells ring, so she would stop. That's very obvious, right? Another example that we see on, I believe it's all Star Wars movies, it's the I have a bad feeling about this. The character usually say that a few moments before something bad happened. And in the beginning of the first few movies, it was used as a foreshadowing. And foreshadowing, it can be used even for in the titles. We have the foreshadowing on the Mandalorian. If you read all the titles of the episodes, you can start having a sense of what is going to happen. For example, on the I believe it's the sixth episode of season two, is called the tragedy. What is the tragedy? And what is the tragedy? The child gets abducted by the Empire. On Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, we know that Aragorn is gonna return as a king. Now it's gonna be the king of the kingdom. And foreshadowing can be very subtle, as in the titles, or it can be very in your nose, like Game of Thrones did. Well, and those terms they are usually used combined with each other because they complement each other in different ways, and they're all used to make the story and the plot go go forward, move forward, but not just like the very linear way. They can use to spice it up, change that, and knowing those terms, knowing what they actually mean, you can start spotting things, and that's a really nice way to craft theories. I use that a lot. I'm using that to craft theories of my own for WandaVision, great show by the way. Because they help you understand how a script and a story can be made and can be changed, and so you can spot the few things, and that is really cool. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe. I talk about the film industry and TV every week, or almost every week. I missed last week because my mic broke down, but now I'm back, and well, thank you for watching. I see you in the next one.